The Ba'thist regime in Syria, which came to power in 1963, established a dictatorship characterized by repression of opposition movements, particularly Sunni Muslim groups like Syrian Muslim Brotherhood and Islamist Mujahideen. This repression was manifested in violent crackdowns in cities such as Hama, Homs, Aleppo, and Damascus. The regime was dominated by individuals from the Alawi minority, leading to perceptions of sectarian favoritism and corruption. Despite promises of Arab socialism and nationalist ideals, the regime failed to implement substantial reforms, exacerbating socioeconomic inequalities and political discontent. The outbreak of the Syrian Revolution in 2011 can be attributed to a culmination of grievances against the regime's authoritarianism, corruption, and economic mismanagement. Protests initially began peacefully but escalated into a full-scale uprising as the regime responded with violence and repression. The Syrian Revolution differed from previous opposition movements in scale and scope, with a larger portion of the country becoming involved in the conflict. Additionally, international interference, with various countries providing political, financial, and military support to opposition groups, turned the intra-Syrian conflict into a proxy war. Understanding the history and background of the Ba'thist regime is crucial for comprehending the origins and dynamics of the Syrian Revolution and the regime's response to it. The regime's entrenched authoritarianism, sectarian dynamics, and failure to address grievances laid the groundwork for the eruption of widespread unrest and conflict in Syria. The Ba'thist Revolution of March 8, 1963 marked a significant turning point in Syrian history, as the Ba'thist military, led by the Secret Military Committee, successfully orchestrated a military coup that ousted the previous separatist regime. This regime, dominated by Sunni Damascene officers, was dissolved, and its members were purged from the army. Following the coup, there was a notable increase in the number of minority officers, particularly those from Alawi backgrounds, within the military ranks. This was largely due to the recruitment of officers and non-commissioned officers based on family, tribal, and regional connections, consolidating the power of the Ba'thist regime. The Secret Military Committee, predominantly composed of Alawis, played a crucial role in this process. The purges of 1963 had long-lasting effects, as many officers who rose to senior positions in the Syrian armed forces in subsequent decades could trace their origins to this period. Alawi officers, in particular, assumed prominent roles within the military hierarchy, facilitated by figures like Muhammad Umarin, Salajuddin, and Hafiz al-Assad, who held influential positions within the Ba'thist Military Committee. The coup also sparked opposition from predominantly Sunni Nasserist officers, leading to abortive coup attempts and subsequent anti-Ba'thist publications that portrayed the regime as sectarian. Despite the Ba'ath Party's secular ideology, Sunni observers perceived the rise of minority officers as a sectarian plot, contributing to sectarian tensions within Syrian society. The aftermath of the coup saw instances of sectarian discrimination and violence, as described by Muta Safadi, a former Ba'thist who later became critical of the regime. Safadi's account highlighted sectarian dynamics within Syrian prisons, where prisoners endured torture and discrimination based on their religious affiliations. While Safadi's portrayal may contain elements of polemicism, his observations shed light on the complex interplay of sectarianism and power dynamics within Ba'thist Syria. The events of 1963 laid the foundation for the Ba'thist regime's grip on power and its subsequent entanglement in sectarian tensions, culminating in the Syrian Revolution of 2011. The period following the Ba'thist Revolution saw the emergence of what could be described as petty kings, akin to the Andalusian Muluk al-Tawaif, where each leader controlled a portion of the state apparatus according to their whims. Ba'thist rulers, having purged their non-Ba'thist rivals from the military, engaged in an intra-Ba'thist struggle for power. Loyalty to individual leaders was often based on sectarian affiliations and regional ties, leading to the formation of loyalist groups within the army and intelligence agencies. Within the Ba'thist military organization, opportunistic recruitment practices persisted, resulting in a reliance on individuals recruited based on personal connections rather than merit. Discrimination against Sunnis in military training and advancement opportunities further entrenched sectarian divisions within the armed forces. military units often became dominated by a single sectarian group, exemplified by the 70th Armored Brigade, which was predominantly composed of Alawi personnel under the command of Alawi General Muhammad Umran. This sectarian imbalance in military composition persisted over time, reinforced by continued practices of favoritism and co-optation within military academies. Sunni commanders faced challenges in exerting authority over units comprised mainly of Alawi personnel, as Alawi officers wielded significant influence beyond their formal ranks. The phenomenon of sectarian control extended beyond the military, with Colonel Abd al-Hamid Sarai noting in 1955 that a significant portion of non-commissioned officers belonged to the Alawi sect. The consolidation of power among Ba'thist leaders, based on sectarian and regional allegiances, contributed to the formation of factions within the regime, reminiscent of the petty kings of Andalusia. This factionalism not only influenced internal dynamics but also perpetuated sectarian divisions within Syrian society, setting the stage for the complex political landscape that would unfold in the decades to come. The power struggle among the original members of the Ba'thist Military Committee ultimately led to the ascension of Alawi General Hafiz al-Assad as Syria's leader for the next 3 decades. The purge of Sunni officers began with the expulsion of Alawi General Muhammad Umran in 1965, accused of promoting sectarianism within the armed forces. Umran openly advocated for the empowerment of the Alawi, Druze, and Ismaili communities against Sunni President Amin al-Hafiz and his supporters, which backfired as it violated the Ba'thist ideology of suppressing sectarian divisions. Although sectarianism was extensively exploited for practical reasons, openly advocating for sectarian ties weakened one's position within the power struggle. Alawi Major General Salajuddin strategically refrained from openly promoting sectarianism, allowing him to capitalize when his Sunni opponents raised the issue. The power struggle between Jadid and President al-Hafiz exacerbated tensions within the Syrian armed forces, leading to a polarization between Sunnis and members of religious minorities, albeit more as a result of common opposition and sectarian distrust than sectarian unanimity. The delicate balance of power among army factions shifted with the coup on February 23, 1966, known as the February 23rd Movement, resulting in the purge of prominent Sunni officers' factions. This further increased the representation of religious minorities within the armed forces, particularly the Alawi and Druze, at the expense of Sunnis. Alawi-dominated elite military units were strategically stationed near Damascus to protect the regime, while other units, predominantly Sunni, were deployed elsewhere. Subsequent regimes became adept at defending their positions against internal challenges, ensuring that the delicate equilibrium preceding the 1966 coup did not recur. This period marked a significant consolidation of power within the Ba'thist regime, characterized by shifting alliances and sectarian tensions that would shape Syrian politics for decades to come. Salim Haytham, a Druze officer, and other Druze officers plotted against the new Ba'thist regime after the 1966 coup. Haytham's refusal to include Alawi officers in his secret organization led to tensions within the army. When part of the plot was discovered, Druze officers were arrested. Haytham then attempted to pressure the regime by arresting high-level party leaders during a banquet, but his coup failed, and he fled to Jordan. Haytham accused the regime of promoting sectarianism and favoring Alawi officers. His anti-Alawi propaganda further strained relations between the Druze community and the central authorities. During the Syrian Revolution in 2011, the Druze community remained relatively neutral, fearing radical Islamist forces that might threaten their position. After returning to Damascus during the 1967 war with the alleged intention of helping the regime, Haytham was accused of another plot and executed. Ironically, his actions indirectly strengthened the position of Alawi officers within the regime, despite his attempt to overthrow it. Haytham's claim that Syria was threatened by sectarianism and tribalism was considered an exaggeration. While the power struggle primarily involved the Ba'thist military organization and parts of the civilian party, it did not encompass larger segments of Syrian society, unlike the civil war that erupted after the 2011 Syrian Revolution. After Salim Haytham's failed coup attempt, not only were Druze officers purged from the military and party apparatus, but also some Ba'thist officers and civilians from the Horan province, neighboring Jabal al-Doruz. They openly expressed concerns about the increasing predominance of Alawi officers in the army and the party. This dissent led to their dismissal from key positions in the party and government. Critics of the growing influence of Alawi officers found themselves marginalized or eliminated, inadvertently contributing to the further strengthening of Alawi dominance within the military. Of the original 15 members of the Ba'thist Military Committee, only 7 remained, with 6 being from minority groups, predominantly Alawis. The remaining Sunnis and Druze members were also removed, consolidating Hafiz al-Assad's power as the sole leader among various Beti kings. This struggle for power within the Alawi community intensified between Salar Jadid and Hafiz al-Assad. Jadid advocated socialist transformation and prioritized cooperation with communist countries, while al-Assad emphasized Arab nationalist interests and the armed struggle against Israel. Despite Jadid's majority support within the party, al-Assad maintained de facto supremacy by ignoring party decisions and purging Jadid's supporters from the military. Jadid's faction attempted to remove al-Assad and other key figures from power during a party congress in 1968, but al-Assad swiftly countered, leading to the arrest and imprisonment of Jadid and other opponents. Al-Assad's regime ruthlessly suppressed dissent, assassinated exiled opponents, and maintained a monopoly on political power. With al-Assad's ascendancy, the civilian section of the Ba'ath Party lost influence, and the regime centralized power under his leadership. In 1971, al-Assad became Syria's first Alawi president, marking a departure from Sunni presidents. Sunni dissatisfaction with Alawi rule led to protests, resulting in amendments to the constitution to emphasize Islam's role. Al-Assad relied on close associates, including family members, to consolidate power, while corruption within the regime remained unchecked despite anti-corruption efforts. The regime's inability to root out corruption highlighted its dependence on traditional loyalties, undermining its ideological commitment to secularism and nationalism. The Syrian Ba'ath regime, despite its professed ideals of secularism, socialism, and Arab unity, ultimately became the antithesis of these very principles in practice. The Ba'thists aimed to eliminate sectarianism, regionalism, and tribalism, yet their rule exacerbated these divisions. Similarly, their goals of socialism and social equality were undermined by rampant corruption, clientelism, and favoritism within the regime. The Sunni population harbored deep resentment against the Alawi-dominated Ba'ath regime, viewing it as sectarian and oppressive. While dictatorship was not new in Syria, the fact that Alawis and other minorities held power, particularly in the military and security apparatus, intensified Sunni grievances. The regime's secularism was perceived by conservative Sunnis as a facade for Alawi suppression, leading to extremism among some members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Violent uprisings and demonstrations erupted in Sunni-majority cities, reflecting Sunni discontent with Ba'athist rule. The regime's response to dissent was brutal, further fueling Sunni resentment. The Muslim Brotherhood, along with extremist factions like the Fighting Vanguards, resorted to terrorism and targeted assassinations of Alawi figures in an attempt to destabilize the regime. The regime's repression escalated, culminating in the infamous Hama massacre in 1982, where thousands of civilians were killed during a month-long military operation to quell an uprising by the Muslim Brotherhood. The massacre left a lasting scar on Syrian society, deepening sectarian tensions and sowing the seeds of future conflict. Despite the regime's success in crushing the Muslim Brotherhood, Sunni grievances persisted, and sectarian tensions remained high. The repression in Hama and elsewhere set the stage for future strife, which erupted on a larger scale during the Syrian Revolution in 2011. While some Syrians may have initially supported the regime's crackdown in Hama as a means of preventing civil war, the brutality of the Syrian war that ensued in 2011 far exceeded the violence of the Hama massacre. The conflict resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions of refugees, and widespread destruction, challenging earlier perceptions of the regime's actions. In hindsight, while the events of 1982 might have provided a warning of the regime's response to dissent, the scale and brutality of the Syrian war that followed were beyond many observers' expectations. The regime's actions and the ensuing conflict underscored the deep-seated divisions and grievances within Syrian society, which continue to shape the country's trajectory. Under Hafez al-Assad's rule in Syria from 1970 to 2000, the power structure remained largely unchanged, with key Alawi officers maintaining their positions within the military and security apparatus. Al-Assad's emphasis on loyalty ensured stability within the regime, with few purges occurring during his tenure. In 1983, when al-Assad fell seriously ill, the question of succession became a concern. Al-Assad appointed a committee to manage affairs in his absence, excluding his younger brother Rif'at, who had his own power base with the defense companies. Rif'at attempted to seize power but was ultimately thwarted when al-Assad ordered the withdrawal of Alawi soldiers loyal to Rif'at, rendering his revolt ineffective. The crisis highlighted the risk of relying too heavily on specific Alawi factions, such as the Murshidiyyan, as demonstrated by Rif'at's dependence on them. Al-Assad's eldest son, Basil, was groomed as a potential successor but died in a car accident in 1994. Bashar, another son, then emerged as the chosen successor. Despite the regime's denial of a hereditary presidency, Bashar, a trained ophthalmologist, was promoted rapidly through the ranks of the military and Ba'ath Party, culminating in his inauguration as president in 2000 at the age of 34. His ascension was accepted by high-ranking military supporters of his father, symbolizing a desire to continue al-Assad's legacy and maintain unity within the Alawi community. The younger generation of Alawis, including relatives of prominent generals, pursued diverse career paths, contributing to some social change within the traditionally closed Alawi community. However, the military continued to be dominated by Alawi officers, reflecting the regime's reliance on this group for support and stability. Overall, Hafez al-Assad's rule was characterized by a centralized power structure centered around himself, with loyalty and continuity as guiding principles. His succession planning ensured a smooth transition of power to his son Bashar, maintaining the regime's grip on authority and the loyalty of key supporters within the Alawi community. The power struggle in Syria has been influenced by a complex interplay of factors, including sectarianism, regionalism, tribalism, socioeconomic disparities, and ideological differences. While these elements have often overlapped and reinforced each other, they have also shaped the dynamics of political power and governance in Syria in distinct ways. Socioeconomic factors have played a significant role, particularly for sectarian minorities like the Alawis, Druzes, and Ismailis. These groups often found their socioeconomic interests aligning with their sectarian, regional, and tribal affiliations. Moreover, socioeconomic grievances could be channeled through sectarian channels, contributing to tensions and conflicts within Syrian society. Ideological differences have also been important, though they have sometimes taken a backseat to sectarian, regional, and tribal considerations, especially during times of crisis. Political groups that monopolized power often prioritized their own political agendas over ideological considerations, while those excluded from power were unable to implement their ideals. Under Hafez and Bashar al-Assad's rule, Syria experienced a period of internal stability due to the dominance of a single military faction and a highly effective security apparatus. However, this stability was linked to the absence of political reforms and changes in the ruling elite, setting the stage for potential disruption once the long-serving leadership disappeared. Syria, under Hafez al-Assad, emerged as a major regional power, less beholden to traditional rivalries with other Arab countries. However, the Syrian Revolution in 2011 marked a significant turning point, leading to a loss of regional influence and internal upheaval due to the Syrian war and foreign interference. While some Ba'athist leaders may have been idealistic in their pursuit of secular Arab nationalism and socio-economic development, the reality of Syrian politics necessitated the use of primordial ties to monopolize and maintain power. Sectarian, regional, and tribal affiliations became integral to the power structure, enabling the ruling Ba'athists to survive for decades. The domination of lower middle class and rural minorities in the Ba'athist regime led to a social revolution, upsetting traditional power dynamics and creating new tensions between urban Sunnis and rural minorities. The enrichment of Alawi officers and their alliance with the urban bourgeoisie further entrenched the regime's power base. Despite efforts by al-Assad to project an orthodox religious image for the secular regime, sectarian favoritism and solidarity remained politically motivated. leading many Sunnis to perceive Alawi-dominated rule as a form of religious repression. This resentment simmered beneath the surface and erupted during the Syrian Revolution in 2011, fueled by decades of grievances and repression.